Hey lads, Magic the Gathering players, we are back. This is Maelstrom MTG. We're going to be talking about a really traditional deck that a lot of people don't think can be played on budget, and it's really hard to play budget control decks, and I understand that. But real quick, I'm just going to have a little note before we start off. Based off of the responses I got off of the last video, people seem to really be in support of me doing other videos like gameplay. Now, I know that doing a deck tech every day, people might lose interest in just watching the deck tech and might start just wanting to see me play. I understand that, and I want to give a little insight because I spend so much time deck building that it's become an easier thing for me to do. I can just crank out 4 or 5 deck lists over a weekend, and then if I need to, I can finish them up over the week while I'm recording the others. But I've gotten so used to just building different decks that it does not take me long. It does not take me a million games to hammer out what cards I need in a deck. It does not take me that long to hammer out like what's good, what's not, and the amount of cards I need in a list. It really doesn't. And so for that, it's easier for me to just give you guys a deck list, like basically every day, and do something different on the weekends. But I am more than okay, because we're over 50 decks in at this point. I am more than okay taking a break from deck building and playing some games. Now, I'm probably not going to be playing on X-Mage or MTGO. I'm going to be honest on that front. I'm just not going to. And that's because X-Mage is, okay, like, it works, it's functional, but it's horrible to look at. Like, it's a monstrosity. It's so clunked up, and, like, I don't like it. I've played it before, and I've enjoyed it before, but to record on, I think even Untap.in's better. MTGO's the golden standard, I feel like, but Untap.in, I'll hover over cards and stuff and you'll be able to see them, so it'll be okay. Moving on though, I do want to do at least our last daily deck tech. We will have more deck techs in the future for those who like deck techs. It's just not going to be every day. So this list is Azorius Control, and it's a very traditional style of control. And if someone were to walk up to me, I have a lot of other people who just message me like, hey, how do you build a control deck? And I just kind of laugh and tell them we're going to have to sit down, because it's not something I can just be like, okay, so you're going to start off with 7 cards in your opening hand, and if one of them's a land and 6 of them are bolts, you keep it, and then you draw another bolt, and then maybe a land or 2, and then you just basically win the game. You know, something like that, because 7 times 3 equals 21. But even burn does take a little bit of effort, but it burns the kind of deck where you can just pick up the deck, not know what it is, and be like, oh wait, I'm supposed to hit the opponent. Where control, you're gonna draw your hand and you're gonna be like, wait, what? And be so confused. Anyway, so that's the thing. You have to understand that control is going to be something that's more of a learning curve than other decks. And so we're going to just hop right in, because I really don't want to take too much time with the precursor to the deck that we run out of time for the deck. So we had Narsets to prevent our opponents from drawing more than 1 card a turn, which is more useful than you think it is. And then to filter our deck for a lot of cards. Then we have Teferi as a way to restrict our opponents to sorcery speed, as well as making our things instant speed, which is very good for things like board wipes. And then we can bounce stuff to draw cards. Opt is card draw. Oust is removal, particularly good against Death Shadow. Path to Exile is very good removal, especially with Graveyard Recursion decks. Spell Snare is very relevant in a metagame where all of the cards are either mana cost 1 or 2, capping usually at 3 unless you're Tron. Ether Gust in the main board might seem weird to non-control players, but if you're a control player, you'll understand why this is in here. With all of the red or green decks that are out there, it doesn't have to be red and green, just red or green. Ether Gust can just be very, very helpful against those kinds of decks. Even against Storm, where you can just bounce their Passion Flames, and they're kind of out of luck there. So it's very good, and we have more of these in the sideboard. Then we have Logic Knots as a way to get use out of our sideboard, not out of our sideboard, out of our graveyard, and it's a very, very powerful card. It's just, you're going to have cards in your graveyard, and we do have things to fill our graveyard, and we have things to cast, but quite often you don't need more than counter unless they pay 2, counter unless they pay 3. Counter unless they pay 1 is easy, but 2 or 3 is a lot harder. And you don't even have to delve, you can just cast this. Anyway, but having the opportunity to delve is very, very nice. Next up is quite possibly the best, the best budget counter spell that I have. And it's in here because it's counter unless they pay 3, and quite often counter unless they pay 3 will just counter the spell. And I bring up Mana Leak so often in my videos because of its power level, and people, I'm really sorry if you're getting sick of me probably saying the verbatim phrase over and over again about Mana Leak, like, oh, it basically counters, it reads counter target spell. Like, I say that so much, and I know, and I'm sorry, but it's true. Moving on is Mission Briefing. Mission Briefing says Surveil 2, and then an instant sorcery spell in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. Now, Surveil is basically scrying, but you can put it in your graveyard, and this is going to be our replacement because we have a distinct lack of Snapcaster Mages in the deck. And I know you might immediately say, but it doesn't replace Snapcaster Mage. Yes, it does. It does. This is perfect. This is fine. We don't need a creature. Like, we really don't need a creature. This does the job perfectly. We have other ways to deal damage to our opponent. We have other ways to block. We have other ways to remove stuff. We don't need a creature. So that reason, Mission Briefing's in here as a 3 of. I've seen people try to play Torrential Gear Hulks, and honestly, like, go for it if you want. But Mission Briefing you can play sooner. But once you consider the fact that you have to pay 2 mana on top of, maybe you're flashing back Shadow of the Sky, that's 6 mana. So that's Torrential Gear Hulk. And then Torrential Gear Hulk's a creature, but then, like, you're board wiping, so, like, it dies, but then you'll draw a card, I guess. That being said, though, quite often you're going to get close to that 6 mana anyway. It's just, I prefer Mission Briefing because you can do, like, 3 mana Path to Exile, and then you don't have to pay 6 mana and wait till turn 6. You can deal, because turn 6 is going to be like, oh, we're trying to, like, turn around the game into our favor now rather than just stopping our opponent. Because the start of the game is, like, controlling our opponent, stopping what they're doing, and later in the game, we're going to be, I don't know, swinging in with Celestial Colonnade. Which is going to be, it might seem weird, but our main way of winning with the deck. Next up is Archmage's Charm. Usually I would love to see more of these in the list, but we don't have the budget for it. It just gives us a little bit of flexibility with drawing cards, countering spells, or gaining control of permanents, such as, I don't know, Death Shadow. Next up is Timely Reinforcements. It's amazing against aggro decks, which there's a plethora of right now. It says, if you have less life than an opponent, you gain 6 life. If you control fewer creatures, you create 3 creatures. It's amazing. Next up is for Shadow of the Sky. Shadow of the Sky says each player who controls a creature with power 4 or greater draws a card, then destroys all creatures. We don't really care about them drawing cards, especially if we have Gnar set out and then we have to ferry out. So we make this instant speed, and then we board wipe during their turn, and they don't draw a card because they can't draw more than 1 card per turn. But even if they do draw the card, even if we don't have that set up, because, like, it's a distinct possibility that we don't have the setup, even if they do draw a card, it's not the worst. It's not the worst thing in the world. If they have a bunch of creatures, I'd much rather them have one more card in their hand than be able to kill us. But those are our spells, and if you want more in depth explanation of that, I can do it. But I've got to keep these videos timely. Next up are our lands, and this is where we talk about our win condition, which is weird. We have Celestial Colonnade, and so if our opponent does not just concede out of being just really annoyed with our spells, which if you get more competitive, they won't concede out of just pure frustration, typically. But once you've got a lock on the game, they might just go, hey, game 2. But Celestial Colonnade is our eventual way of winning the game. We'll just turn it into a 5-mana 4/4 every turn with Vigilance and Flying. So if we have enough lands, we can even do that and then leave it up for a blocker. Who knows? Next up, we can also just not attack and threaten it as a blocker until we get, I don't know, more mana or a way to deal with their board. Then we have Field of Ruin as a way to deal with pesky lands. We have Irrigated Farmland as a bicycle land. We can cycle it, or we can have it enter tapped. It's a Plains Island, so I don't know. If you were decide, hey, I want to run some fetch lands, this can still stay in here. Islands because it's our main color of the deck, and then Plains because it's our secondary color of the deck. And then Temple of Enlightenment, because temples are really good in control. Like, quite often, the entering tapped will not affect you really at all. And so, but the scrying is amazing. Now, I just want to say, before we move on to the sideboard, it does not take any effort really from your part to just if you're in full screen, exit full screen, hit that like button. If you're not in full screen, I don't know, masochist, I don't know. But give that thumbs up, and please just let me know that I'm doing something good, because really, there's nothing wrong with, there's no negative impact of you just hitting that thumbs up. If I did anything good, if I made you happy, if you enjoyed this list, or even if I just occupied part of the time in your day. Maybe you're doing homework while listening to some random dude talk about Magic the Gathering. If that's the case, if I at least occupied some of your time sufficiently, please let me know by hitting that thumbs up. It really means a lot. And if you want to go a step further, hit that subscribe. I'll honestly be happy with a thumbs up. Every thumbs up I get makes me really happy. But moving on to the sideboard, we do have ousts for more Death Shadow hate, or just more if we need to. Maybe our opponent's even playing Hardened Scales, and so bouncing their creature is especially effective. Ether Gust is going to be a way for us to deal with aggro and combo decks. Celestial Purge for aggro decks and mid-range decks. Damping Spear originally was in here as a originally people were like, oh, it's going to be super good against Tron. It does slow Tron down a little bit, but honestly, and I would probably still bring it in, I'm not going to lie. That being said, it's still not as effective as you think it is in the new versions, because the new versions, even if they only add 1 mana, they'll just play Karn or something. So if you play this, be ready to counter Karn on turn 4. Or turn 3 even. Mystical Dispute is going to be a way for us to add more counterspells to the list, as well as having a way to deal with other control decks or other blue decks. Opposed to common belief, not all blue decks are control decks. Anyway, this is a way for us to deal with other blue decks, though. If they go first, we want to hold up to counterspell for Teferi on turn 3. Next up is more Timely Reinforcements, and I explained why this card was good, and we would want more if we are in that matchup. And then Settle the Wreckage for any other matchups where we are dealing with a big board state, or even like it can even be a smaller board state, but like an example of when we would use this is like against even like boggles. Like sure it's only a 1-of, but like it gets past everything that boggles does. So this is one of the ways we can get past boggles. There are other ways we can deal with it, but it's one of the ways. But it's also it's a way for us to deal with very, very aggressive decks. Anyway, that's gonna be everything for the deck. If you liked it, please like the video. Please let me know below, and I really hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you next time.